Black Thought, speaking to, here are all the black people. This is black as it gets. I thought this was a reparations rally, so I'm a little confused. But good morning. I want to thank you all for having me. I know, yes, it is early, so I'm trying to keep this as painless, honest, clear, and real as possible. First and foremost, I want to say a special happy birthday to my beautiful wife, Michelle. Who's in the building? Michelle, AKA Opal, if you look at my Wikipedia page. I don't know why her name is Opal on Wikipedia. We're gonna get that updated for you, babe. Today, I'm gonna be sharing about 4 things that I've learned being a professional creative over the past 30-some-odd years that will hopefully, ultimately, help you to stand out, to embrace your own light, and to surpass your fears. To start, let me begin with a proper introduction. I'm known as Black Thought, but my name is Tariq Trotter. You should all say, "Hi, Tariq." Hi, Tariq. It's Tariq with a K, but I publicly go with a Q. Then that's only on the days that I feel like a Q over the K, and other days it's a K over the Q. So here's that. And I've always suffered from an almost debilitating fear of being noticed. I've somehow managed to have a 30-year creative career built on ambiguity, on being that guy from that thing whose name, whose contribution, whose purpose of which you're semi-aware but not completely sure. On more occasions than I can count, I've taken the back seat and I've watched as my partner and co-founding member, as other brothers and sisters in my graduating class basked in the limelight, a light that I've dodged literally and figuratively, as I've managed to play both leading and supporting roles in the equation that is our band, The Roots. On stage, I've been able to hide in plain sight behind the light show, the sheer sound, the acrobatics of the bass player and the guitarist, and the big-ass tuba. The shade of my beard, hat, sunglasses, all through which I managed to maintain the distance between the world and me, existing sort of from the shadows. This has somehow been sustainable, but more recently, not truly fulfilling. What I've learned in all these years of personally playing it safe is that, well, maybe you shouldn't. I've always had an artistic eye and a unique sense of style, and yet I was never into standing out too much. I come from a place and an era where drawing attention has always been frowned upon because sometimes your very survival could depend upon your ability to blend in, your ability to be like water or like a chameleon, to never draw. Where I come from, when someone is using too much energy or shining too hard, we say, stop drawing. When any person, place, or thing is overly annoying, or overcompensating, overwhelming, overachieving, we say, that shit is drawn. This is drawn, stop drawing attention. I grew up in Philadelphia in the 1970s and 80s, knowing so many who stood out and spoke out, who lived out loud, and eventually paid the price for it. Having done so, my father was murdered in his 20s. My mother, having done so, was murdered in her 30s. This did nothing for me but solidify my fear of being visible. I didn't have that much desire to be seen or heard as an individual. I wanted to move in a space below the radar due to my fear of flying. Didn't want to draw. I've done myself many a disservice blocked many of my own blessings. I've gotten in my own way on many occasions because the law of attraction is real. And electromagnetic energy is scientific fact. And when we project the energy that says, I want to be ignored or leave me alone, I'm uncomfortable, I'm unconfident, after a while that energy speaks volumes and the universe begins to oblige. So that blessing, that opportunity or achievement or insight into greatness begins to naturally pass you by because it's what you're asking for. It's what you'll accept. It's what you attract. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. It is that we're what? Powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. So, how do you give yourself permission to shine? How do you make the decision to get out of your own way, to move still, despite and through fear, to see yourself and your talents and tell your stories that honor those? I've always said that the job of the creative, the innovator, influencer, is to tell and sell within this capitalistic society in which we live, stories, okay, through movement, through colors on a canvas, the written or spoken word, through images on a screen, the waves in an algorithm, the culinary arts, fashion, one's strength on the field, bravery in battle, poise and performance in the boardroom, the newsroom, the bedroom. These are all the sum of our experience. We're all uniquely comprised of all these different paths, that equal our personal narrative. And that narrative is a very precious commodity. So when you're in the business of being creative, when telling stories and creativity is literally your life as it is in advertising, or for me as a lyricist and writer, how do you stay fresh, rooted, inspired? How do you continue to strive for and measure yourself against your own internal barometer for greatness, as opposed to a constant navigation of external accolades, recognition, and validation? How do you see yourself, honor yourself, respect yourself today, now, even if you haven't before, even if your colleagues or corporation or job don't, in order to shift that energy of the universe back into your favor? 4 lessons, 4 key things I've learned in this creative journey as I've gone from making myself small and taking up less space to the important realization that I owed it to myself, to my talents, to the sacrifices of those I've known who've helped me to be great, my kids, my wife, my legacy, the opportunity to be my most expansive self. If I look back over my 40-some-odd year life and my 30-some-odd year creative career, these have been and are some of the key cornerstones of my personal growth. If you haven't been listening to anything I said, now is the time to wake the fuck up. See, I had to throw a little curse word in there just to make sure y'all all awake. 1, pay close attention to patterns. 2, always know yourself, because then you can reinvent yourself. 3, get outside of your comfort zone. Shatter your creative comfort. And 4, work hard and then work harder. Let's get into it. Pay close attention to patterns. Pay attention to the patterns of those who came before you and to the current patterns of culture and society. And from this observation, determine how to distinguish yourself from the pack. Sun Tzu states, the art of war is governed by 5 constant factors to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, and finally, method and discipline. Sun Tzu goes into detail about each of these factors, but the essence is that one cannot win a war if these details are not in your favor. So paying attention to the patterns first and foremost forces you to slow down and assess as well as access yourself, to go within into your own stillness and understand exactly what the fuck you want to contribute to this world. See, paying attention to the patterns then allows you to understand with the knowledge of your innate strengths and a deeper understanding of your areas of weakness. A formula for your own success based on the shifts in culture that you have seen in the past, can see in the present, and thus can predict for the future. It becomes a methodology. It becomes your lane. I wrote the song What They Do with the Roots and a brother named Raphael Sadiq in 1995. What They Do was an observation of the music industry, and we used that song to address what was happening in the world, in the culture, and in the industry at large. That year, as a people, we were facing frustrations and juxtapositions. On the one hand, we were enjoying the success that we had newly earned from and through this genre called hip-hop. And on the other, we were moving away from some of the core artistic principles and innovation that had marked hip-hop as an incredible creative movement. In the industry of entertainment, an industry then and now, irreverently manufacturing, marketing, and packaging rap and hip-hop and as artists, all as mainstream commodities. What had become the new normal was an assembly line style starter kit that supposedly lent validity to artistic identity. There was zero originality, not in the sound, the style, or the imagery. Everything had become super, hyper predictable. With What They Do, I held a mirror up to the rap status quo and established myself and our band as the antithesis to what was trending at the time. It was a decision that would forever become part of my brand and the core essence of the Roots, my mission statement, if you will. Forever go against the grain. Always take the road less traveled. Never do what they do. While the industry churned out to then drop and discard a whole generation of artists, we worked on consistency, creativity, building narratives, having an artistic lens, existing at the intersections of hip-hop, top-tier instrumentation, and jazz, a unique visual identity, and thus an iconic sound. Watch closely for the patterns of others in order to distinguish yourself from the pack. I actually first learned this when I was about 13, and I was arrested. One very hot summer between the 8th and 9th grade, I was visiting family in a different part of Philly, and I went out walking around the neighborhood with a group of young men. Unbeknownst to me, the group's intention that evening was to assault and rob someone, anyone. In the blink of an eye, the situation shifted from listening to music to attacking an innocent bystander. The sad part is that all parties involved were young black men. And when the man who had been made the victim, another young black man, when he made his way to a nearby restaurant and called the police, they were on us in a matter of minutes. Unfamiliar with the neighborhood and too confused to escape, I was arrested along with 3 other young men who had all taken part in the attack. We were all charged with strong armed robbery and assault. And though I hadn't thrown any physical blows, I was part of the group that did, and I didn't do anything to stop it. In our case, the presiding judge was notorious for giving harsh sentences and railroading young boys and girls of color, introducing them into a corrupt, revolving door juvenile justice system known for graduating kids into the adult big leagues. This judge, he was so insane that he would have young people count the number of windows in the courtroom or the number of buttons on their shirt, and then sentence them to serve that many months or years behind bars. Facing this situation without, 2 parents to help me, I began to ask for advice from the people that I looked up to. one of whom was a young man named Arthur Price. Arthur attended my grandmother's church, and he worked as a youth advisor. Now, despite him always trying to get me to be baptized as a Christian, even though I was raised Muslim, I did take part in the church's available activities infrastructure. Understanding what was at stake and the local norm, Arthur, who is now the pastor of the historic 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, he told me how to dress to enter into that courtroom and to begin to represent myself as an outlier. So during the trial that went on for about a term and a half into my freshman year of high school, I showed up to each hearing dressed in a white shirt and tie with slacks, wearing my school ID prominently, in a place where it was always visible. My co-defendants dressed in sweatpants, t-shirts, and athletic wear. I brought in character witnesses who spoke to my kind nature and the fact that I was an artist, a hard worker, a good kid, who could articulate in that courtroom in ways that defendants aren't allowed, how that one night of mischief could have potentially changed my trajectory had I been sent to a corrections facility at that point in my life. I avoided the sentences that were given to the rest of the group at that time, and I walked. My record was eventually expunged. Whether you're in a courtroom or a meeting room, at a conference or an everyday people party, be willing to stand out. Be brave enough to stand out. Be confident enough to stand out, even if you're not exactly sure if that standout person is yourself, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable, or the image that you're projecting isn't quite exactly who you feel you are right then, right at that moment. In corporate worlds, they say to dress for the job that you want, not the one that you have. As a creative, I would say to dress, speak, think, feel, display the highest version of yourself that you can, especially in situations where you might not be as confident. Be so aware of the world around you and of the narratives that other people are sharing about themselves, and then so attuned to your own vibrational frequency that you can exist and own your own lane. Do it when they call you crazy. Do it when no one else gets it. Do it before the industry catches on. And forget their opinions. Do you. But Tariq, you might say, I don't actually know myself. Well, I don't totally know who I am yet. I know maybe a bit about what I like, what I don't like, what makes me laugh, brings me joy. I know what stresses me out, or some ways to decompress. Hopefully I know my alcohol tolerance, but I can't fully say that I know myself. Well, bravo to you for even having that level of self-awareness to know those things. So you get a gold star. We can start here. Point 2. Again, wake the fuck up if you zoned out. Know it's early. Point 2 is to know yourself and then reinvent yourself. Y'all still with me? All right, moving forward. You absolutely need to get to know yourself and then understand and get comfortable with the one constant that we have in our lives. Change. Change is inevitable. It is unavoidable, and it must constantly and consistently be faced, dealt with, and navigated. Our world changes. Our culture changes. The country changes. The very air we breathe changes. And so you will change. On a molecular level, your cells are dying and being replaced every hour, every day, every week. So not only must you learn how to get to know yourself, but you need to get comfortable with the idea that you will need to constantly relearn yourself, constantly check in and evaluate where you are in the midst of your ongoing metamorphosis, and then lean into that shit. Root, grow, emerge, shift, shed, reinvent, and then rinse and repeat. But how do you get to know yourself? Through stillness, sitting that ass still. And this doesn't have to be literal. I mean, I know dancers and athletes who are all able to find stillness only through movement. It's meditation. Gotti writes, in the attitude of silence, the soul finds the path in a clearer light, and what is elusive and deceptive resolves itself into crystal clearness. Our life is a long and arduous quest after truth. Meditation is waiting on God. Meditation is the transcendence of your thoughts and entering into that space of consciousness that is calm, quiet, and collected. It is a place and a space that observes without judgment, that is both logical and emotional, but rooted in your intuition. That tiny feeling in your gut, and you kind of have to use a bathroom, but don't. The tingling feeling that you can get from nervous excitement. That feeling, hone in on it. Exercise that. Learn how to listen to it, even when it's not as loud as like a bubbly stomach, and is as subtle and quiet as an inclination. It's where your mind, soul, and body all combine to transmit messages to your entire system as you observe patterns in your environment. See how those patterns come up again? And it figures out how to respond to them, how to move, how to shift. It's where you can learn how to sit with both your darkness and your light and not be afraid of either. In that quiet and in that stillness, you start to understand why you are who you are, the events and the people who shaped you, and the small interests that moved your heart as a child. Before anyone told you who you could and couldn't be, your beliefs, your morals, what makes you feel alive, what makes your heart sing, and what makes you cringe. It's where you find forgiveness and closure, healing and oneness with the outcome, where you're able to understand that everything has been working to bring you here, to this very moment. And you can ask, why? What am I here to receive? What does my soul need from this place? Clarity can come with stillness. Self-reinvention is what it looks like in the try again phase of the old saying, if at first you don't succeed. The insider tip from someone who has been working in this capitalistic hamster wheel for this amount of time. External success is an ongoing goal. Nothing will ever be enough. And if you're creative in understanding success from your own internal guidance, then you'll always be experimenting and growing. So yes, try again. Even if it means you're gonna have to abandon the approach to which you've grown accustomed to. Try again. If your campaign didn't roll out as planned, if the whole thing gets canceled by a crazy client who doesn't know what they want, try again. If you're working against a deadline and have gone through plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, try again. Keep trying. Remain ever nimble and ever able to adapt and adopt new ways of thinking, but never go against your self-constitution. Stand for what you stand for. All of you that you found and continue to find in that stillness, build your brand on solid ground, on a rooted foundation, but remain willing to build and destroy, to burn shit down and forge a new self from the fire and rise reborn from the ashes. Change your fighting style. Some of my peers are incredible examples that inspire me to do this. The Jill Scotts and Commons, Snoop Dogg's, Ludacris, Tip Harris, John Legend, my brother Questlove. All people from my graduating class who came up through the ranks of the industry, grew alongside me, and have diversified their interests. They continue to reinvent themselves as composers, as actors, producers, directors, authors, public speakers, voiceover artists. The ability to embrace art and entertainment and pursue it with broad strokes as your perspective, to resist being pigeonholed into what an artist is expected to be, what's traditional in their ways of creation. Not only am I inspired by the contribution that they continue to make, but I'm also fueled by it, because there's that friendly, unspoken competition between any artist and their counterparts. You surpass what you've done before. Redefine yourself and resist external definition. Work harder, go harder to succeed in whatever that uncharted terrain might be. I mean, with John Legend's case, that man won. He got the EGOT. But he don't got that Pulitzer Prize like Kendrick Lamar. Or like my good friend, Rachel Kazdi-Ganza. You know? You can do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want to be. If not you, then who? Somebody. But if you don't take the risk and step out on that limb and do everything within your power to make yourself worthy, and honestly to see yourself as worthy, you'll never know if you're one of those people for whom the dream was meant. At the core of this reinvention is my third lesson in staying alive as a professional creative. You must shatter your creative comfort zone. Continuing with confession time, this for me was one of the hardest things to embrace and admit. I started to understand the power of exploring all of the worlds in which you're creatively uncomfortable about 5 years or so ago. I was doing the Tonight Show. We were 5 years in. I was touring with the Roots. And I started to think about where I wanted to be the next 7 years, what exactly I wanted to be doing, and what I wanted the next chapter of my life and career to look like. I was in the habit, that resembled something like Groundhog Day, an endless loop of showing up and only doing the bare minimum of what was expected of me. I knew then that if I wanted the shift to happen, I had to really make a conscious decision to go above and beyond. So I went back to the stillness. I asked the universe, what are the ways and areas in which I can creatively grow, excel in, and contribute to? The book, The Celestine Prophecy, talks about how every encounter that seems like a coincidence is actually a moment for personal growth and momentum. It states, to stay in the flow of your personal evolution, you must remember to keep your questions always in mind. Even people who are unaware can stumble into answers and see coincidences in retrospect. We must assume every event has significance and contains a message that somehow pertains to our questions. We build our energy and center ourselves in our situations, in the questions we have. And then we receive some form of intuitive guidance, an idea where to go, what to do. Then the coincidences occur to allow us to move in that direction. And each time that these confidences lead us into something new, we grow. We become fuller persons existing at a higher vibration. So I listened. I noticed. I knew I was blocking my blessings up until that point. And as I paid more attention, the lane began to reveal itself. It came in the form of soon-to-be Broadway musical that I've now been working on since then. It's called Black No More. Black No More was a project that was brought to the Roots on the same day that Hamilton was. We went on to executive produce the original Broadway cast recording for Hamilton and an album called the Hamilton Mixtape to win, very many awards and sell very many records. But, at this point, I had zero interest in anything that related to musicals. I was yet to see the light. I hated any dialogue that was steeped in or followed by some corny-ass musical song breakout moment. I took the meeting, actually, and this is all honesty. I took the meeting because the writer of Black No More, John Ridley, had just won an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay for his iconic work, 12 Years a Slave. So I was thinking I would be offered a role in some dope-ass movie. As I sat in that meeting, I became less and less interested as they began to explain the project. This story about a doctor who manipulated vitiligo to turn black people white, and the resulting chaos that ensued, and the way we can lend our voices to the music. I was like, you know. But in that meeting, they compared the play to this new off-Broadway thing that I had never seen before called Hamilton. And I had zero frame of reference. But then earlier that day, I had an audition. In this damn play, Hamilton had come up again. This time, my theatrical manager, was telling me that she represented someone who had been casted in Hamilton. And I recalled the week before that, we had taken a meeting with the record label, that we eventually wound up doing those Hamilton albums with, and they were talking about doing a soundtrack for this random play. So 3 times, 3 totally separate people, 3 different occurrences. Hamilton, the musical, Broadway musicals, musical theater came up like within the course of a few days. So my musical hating self went to see it. Me and my wife went. We went to see it at the Public Theater, and I thought it was amazing. And I thought that it would represent a shift in the culture, even in its most early stages, like I could tell. So I listened as my creative comfort zone was being absolutely shattered. So this one meeting became a series of meetings about this new production that was unnamed at the time. And everyone ended up losing interest. Ridley, my manager, Questlove, everyone had a million other things to do, and it went to the back burner. But I had made a conscious decision that I didn't want to lose this project. It had revealed itself as the answer to my question of what to do, what the next 7 years would look like. It has evolved into something that has the potential to change not just the culture, but to change the world. And it's totally shifted me in the process. I had to fully and wholly get out of my own way. How can I make songs, speaking for 7 different characters at once? I mean, I've never composed, arranged a thing. How do I figure out, what this song sounds like when there are 0 points of reference? Now, I can't even read sheet music. I had to stop saying, I never, I can't, there is no, I don't know how, and just sit and trust and figure it out. Over and over again, I figured it out. Every question I asked was answered by my own self once I sat down, focused, and listened to the universe. Fast forward, and now I have, produced, composed, arranged a whole entire soon-to-be Broadway musical, and I'm acting in it. We going to the moon when this shit hits. But I wouldn't have even been considering, branching out into this new medium and crossing disciplines in that way, or even seen it as a possibility for my talents. You have to explode your comfort zone. And then, finally, we come to point 4. Be willing to work hard, then work harder. This is the last point, y'all. I'm almost done. Work hard, then work harder. The truth that no one wants to readily admit is that hard work does not always pay off. Well, at least not in the way that you thought it would. Things don't always work out. It doesn't always go according to plan. Remember point 2 about self-reinvention and going through plan A to E? It is the way of the world that we all have to fail in order to learn how not to. We have to fall down in order to rise. We learn from our mistakes and the mistakes made by those who came before us, and in turn, it informs the way we move in the future. Hard work, especially if seen as simply an active and consistent willingness to participate in and experience life, will always help us to expand and evolve to the next creative plateau. It is the process of achieving a goal that one actually gains the skills needed to both continue to support that vision and develop the strength, internal fortitude, and insight needed to reach the next level and thus continue to push that goal forward. This is wisdom. It's something that can only be gained through experience. And hard work is that experience. It's a challenge, for each of us to embrace, for sure. But hard work is also a weeder. It weeds out the dreamers from the doers. separates the weak from the strong, the actualizers from the afraid, and ultimately hones, develops, and polishes both our strengths and our weaknesses. Seeking a task and then seeing it to its ultimate completion is the greatest high that you can ever get in your career. And ultimately, it's a choice. There's a quote by our President Obama that I admire greatly after being beaten in his first run for Congress at 40 years old, and wondering if this line of work was actually cut out for him. He had a revelation, and he stated, "The thing that got me through that moment and any other time that I felt stuck is to," well, actually, no, he said, the thing that got me through that moment and any other time that I felt stuck is to remind myself that it's about the work. Because if you're worrying about yourself, if you're thinking, am I succeeding? Am I in the right position? Am I being appreciated? Then you're going to end up feeling frustrated and stuck. But if you can keep it about the work, you'll always have a path. There's always something to be done. Look, I learned this, while getting Black No More ready to debut on Broadway next year. My schedule for just this past August and September, while Black No More was in workshop mode, was insane. My wife and I, we live with our 2 kids in New Jersey, and for those 2 months, I was leaving our home at around 6 a.m. to get into the city by 8:30 or 9. Begin rehearsals for the musical. I would then leave the theater around 2:30 or 3 p.m. and go do the Tonight Show. I would perform until 6, and then from our Midtown headquarters, I would then hustle back downtown to go into the studio until 10, 11, sometimes 12 at night to finalize any changes from the musical production and arrangements for the play. And then back home, and then rinse, repeat. The work was the growth, and it was never ending. But something happens in the midst of this type of controlled wave of intensity that fuels me. Let's also be clear that this type of work schedule, one that lacks any type of personal life balance, is absolutely not one that's sustainable in the long term. So please don't go and burn out, and then come into my IG comments talking about, I told you to hurt yourself. Life is also about balance. It's about finding it, embracing it, and when the waves come, go deep underwater so that you can be transformed and not crushed by them. But sometimes the best way to face your fears is to actually keep moving, often as quickly as possible, in order to not even give them the chance to speak. You keep your head down. As my manager says, put the blinders on, bro. It's time to put the blinders on. And you do the work. And one day you look up and you've built a legacy. So as you move through these creative industries interlaced with corporate bullshit and jargon and rules and regulations, as you seek to understand who you are as an expansive creative soul outside of your paycheck and commoditized skill set, remember to pay close attention to patterns. Know yourself and then reinvent yourself. Shatter that creative comfort and work hard and then harder. Best of luck. I'm excited for all of you and excited to see who you become, what you create, and the incredible ways that your output is going to continue to shape our world. Thank you.